What would you do if you discovered that the charming stranger across from you at dinner wasn't just anyone, but one of the most dangerous men in the city? Today, I'm going to tell you the incredible true story of Sofia Martinez, a brilliant lawyer who thought she was just going on an ordinary blind date. Little did she know, she was about to have dinner with Marco Benedetti, the ruthless Italian mafia boss who controlled half the city's underground empire. This story has everything: romance, danger, moral dilemmas, and a twist that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love and loyalty. So settle in, because what happened next will shock you. Sofia Martinez stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of her law firm, adjusting her navy blue blazer for the third time. At 28, she had built a reputation as one of the city's most promising defense attorneys, working 70-hour weeks and winning cases that others deemed impossible. Her dark hair was pulled back in a professional bun, and her sharp brown eyes reflected the exhaustion of another late night at the office. "You look fine, Sofia. Stop overthinking it," she whispered to herself, though her stomach churned with anxiety. The truth was, Sofia hadn't been on a date in over 2 years. Her best friend Emma had been pestering her for months about her non-existent love life, and finally, Sofia had caved. Emma knew someone, a friend of her boyfriend's cousin, who was supposedly perfect for Sofia. Successful, charming, and according to Emma, devastatingly handsome. "Just one dinner," Emma had pleaded. "If it's terrible, I'll never set you up again. But Sofia, you can't work forever. You need to live a little." Now, standing in that sterile office bathroom at 7:30 on a Friday evening, Sofia wondered if she was making a huge mistake. She had never done the blind date thing before. What if they had nothing to talk about? What if he was boring? What if he was one of those men who spent the entire dinner talking about cryptocurrency? Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Stop overthinking. Villa Romano, 8 p.m. His name is Marco. You're going to love him. And remember, red dress, not the blazer." Sofia glanced down at her professional attire and sighed. Emma was right. She grabbed her small overnight bag from her desk drawer, the one she kept for those nights when she had to crash at the office, and pulled out the red dress Emma had practically forced her to buy months ago. It was elegant, but not too revealing, with a subtle V neckline and flowing fabric that hugged her curves in all the right places. 30 minutes later, Sofia stood outside Villa Romano, one of the city's most exclusive Italian restaurants. The building was an old converted mansion with warm lighting spilling from tall windows, and the scent of garlic and fresh herbs drifted through the evening air. Luxury cars lined the street, and well-dressed couples strolled past, their laughter mixing with the distant sound of classical music. Sofia checked her phone. 8 o'clock exactly. She took a deep breath and walked through the heavy wooden doors. The maître d', a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and a perfectly pressed tuxedo, greeted her with a warm smile. "Good evening, signorina. How may I help you?" "I'm meeting someone," Sofia said, suddenly feeling underdressed despite the red dress. "A reservation under Marco?" She realized she didn't even know his last name. "Ah, si, you must be Miss Martinez. Mr. Benedetti is expecting you. Right this way, per favore." The maître d' led her through the restaurant, past tables of couples sharing intimate conversations over candlelight and wine. The atmosphere was sophisticated and romantic, definitely not Sofia's usual scene. She was more comfortable in courthouse cafeterias and late-night pizza joints near the office. They approached a secluded corner table, and Sofia's breath caught in her throat. The man rising to greet her was, without question, the most handsome man she had ever seen in person. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair styled perfectly, olive skin, and piercing green eyes that seemed to see right through her. He wore an impeccably tailored black suit that probably cost more than Sofia's monthly rent, and when he smiled, revealing perfect white teeth, she felt her knees go weak. "Sofia," he said, his voice carrying a slight Italian accent that made her name sound like poetry. "You are even more beautiful than Emma described." He moved around the table to pull out her chair, and Sophia caught a whiff of his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head spin slightly. His hands were strong and warm as he helped her into her seat, and she noticed he wore a simple but elegant watch that caught the candlelight. "Thank you," Sophia managed, trying to regain her composure. "And you're Marco?" "Marco Benedetti, si. It is my absolute pleasure to meet you." He returned to his seat across from her, and Sophia noticed how he moved with a kind of controlled confidence, like a man who was completely comfortable in his own skin and aware of his effect on others. The waiter appeared almost immediately. Clearly, Marco was a valued customer here. "The usual wine for you, Mr. Benedetti?" "Actually," Marco said, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face. "Let me ask the lady, do you prefer red or white wine?" "Red," Sophia replied, surprising herself. She usually stuck to white wine or, more often, just water during business dinners. "Excellent choice. Bring us a bottle of the 2015 Barolo, Antonio, and perhaps some antipasti to start." As the waiter hurried away, Marco leaned back slightly in his chair, studying Sophia with those intense green eyes. "Emma tells me you are a lawyer. Defense attorney, no?" "Yes, that's right. I work at Morrison & Associates downtown. What about you? What do you do?" There was the briefest hesitation, so brief that Sophia almost missed it. "I'm in business. Import and export mostly. Family business, you could say. Very traditional Italian family." Sophia nodded, taking a sip of water from the crystal glass in front of her. "That sounds interesting. What kind of products do you import?" "Various things," Marco said with a charming smile that somehow didn't quite reach his eyes. "Food products, wine, some manufacturing goods. Nothing too exciting, I'm afraid. I would much rather hear about your work. Defense attorney. That must be very challenging." The wine arrived, and Marco went through the tasting ritual with practiced ease. The Barolo was rich and complex, and Sophia found herself relaxing despite her initial nervousness. Marco was an excellent conversationalist, asking thoughtful questions about her cases, without prying into confidential details, her career goals, and her thoughts on various topics. "You know," Sophia said, after they had ordered their entrees, "when Emma said she wanted to set me up, I was terrified. I haven't dated in years. I've been so focused on building my career that I've completely neglected my personal life." Marco's expression softened. "And what made you finally say yes?" Sophia laughed, feeling more at ease than she had in months. "Honestly, Emma threatened to show up at my office with a megaphone if I didn't agree to at least one date. She said I was becoming a hermit." "Well, I am very grateful to Emma," Marco said, raising his wine glass. "To new beginnings, see?" They clinked glasses, and Sophia felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with the wine. Marco was charming, sophisticated, and genuinely seemed interested in getting to know her. He asked about her family. She was close to her parents, who had immigrated from Mexico when she was young, her hobbies, she admitted she didn't have many, and her dreams for the future. But as the evening progressed, Sophia began to notice small things that struck her as odd. The way other diners glanced at their table with a mixture of respect and nervousness. How the staff treated Marco with an almost reverential deference that went beyond good customer service. The fact that he never directly answered questions about his business, always steering the conversation back to her with skillful deflection. Most notably, there were the men. 2 of them, sitting at separate tables, both alone, both occasionally glancing in Marco's direction. They were trying to be subtle, but Sophia's legal training had taught her to notice details that others might miss. One was a large man with graying hair, wearing a suit that bulged slightly at the chest, suggesting he was armed. The other was younger, with sharp eyes that periodically swept the restaurant. "Marco," Sophia said during a lull in conversation. "Those men over there, do you know them?" Marco didn't turn to look, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What men? The one by the window and the other near the bar. They keep looking over here. For the first time all evening, Marco's composure slipped slightly. His eyes hardened, and Sophia caught a glimpse of something dangerous beneath his charming exterior. It lasted only a second before the smile returned, but it was enough to send a chill down her spine. I'm sure it's nothing, cara mia. Perhaps they are simply admiring your beauty. Can you blame them? The compliment should have made her blush, but instead, Sophia felt a growing unease. Something wasn't right here. The expensive restaurant, the overly deferential staff, the watchful men, Marco's evasiveness about his business. It was starting to paint a picture she didn't like. Their entrees arrived, perfectly prepared ossobuco for Marco and lobster ravioli for Sophia, but she found her appetite waning. She picked at her food while Marco continued to regale her with stories of his travels to Italy, his family's vineyard in Tuscany, and his love of classical music. He was cultured and well-educated, clearly, but there were gaps in his narrative, things that didn't quite add up. Have you always lived here in the city? Sophia asked, trying a different approach. Most of my life, though I travel frequently for business. In fact, I just returned from Sicily last week. Beautiful island, but the business there. It can be complicated. The way he said complicated sent another chill through Sophia. In her line of work, she had dealt with enough criminals to recognize the euphemisms they used. Complicated usually meant illegal. Her phone buzzed with a text message, and she glanced down at it. Emma. How's it going? Is he as gorgeous as promised? I want details. Sophia looked up to find Marco watching her with an unreadable expression. Everything okay? Just Emma checking in, Sophia said, trying to keep her voice light. She wants to know if you're living up to her hype. Marco's smile returned, but Sophia was beginning to notice that it never quite reached his eyes. And what will you tell her? That you're very intriguing, Sophia said carefully. Intriguing, an interesting choice of words. Marco leaned forward slightly, and Sophia caught that expensive cologne again. Tell me, Sophia, in your work as a defense attorney, do you ever defend people who others might consider morally questionable? The question caught her off guard. Everyone deserves a defense. That's the foundation of our legal system. Even people who have done bad things? Alleged bad things, Sophia corrected. And yes, even then, the presumption of innocence is sacred. Marco nodded approvingly. You have strong principles. I admire that. In my experience, the world is not as black and white as people like to believe. Good people sometimes do questionable things, and bad people sometimes do good things. The truth is usually somewhere in between, no? Sophia felt like she was being tested, though she couldn't figure out why. I suppose that's true, but there are still lines that shouldn't be crossed. And who decides where those lines are drawn? Before Sophia could answer, one of the men she had noticed earlier, the younger one, approached their table. He was tall and lean, with dark hair and cold eyes, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the predatory way he moved. "Scusi, Mr. Benedetti," he said in a low voice, barely acknowledging Sophia's presence. "There is a situation that requires your attention." Marco's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The charming date disappeared, replaced by someone harder, more authoritative. "Not now, Luca. It cannot wait, signore. The Russians. There has been a development." Sophia's blood ran cold. Russians? This was sounding more and more like the kind of criminal cases she handled at work. Organized crime, territorial disputes, violence. She gripped her wine glass tighter, trying to process what she was hearing. Marco's jaw clenched, and he turned to Sophia with what looked like genuine regret. "I am so sorry, cara mia. There is an urgent business matter I must attend to. Can we perhaps continue this evening another time?" Sophia nodded, not trusting her voice. She was simultaneously relieved to have an excuse to leave and terrified by what she was beginning to suspect about her charming date. Marco stood and moved to her side of the table, helping her with her chair. "Antonio will call you a taxi, see? And dinner is taken care of." "That's not necessary." "I insist." His hand briefly touched her lower back as he guided her toward the exit, and despite everything, Sophia felt that same electric spark she had experienced all evening. "I had a wonderful time tonight, Sophia. You are exceptional." At the front of the restaurant, Marco took her hand and lifted it to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned and romantic, and Sophia hated that it made her heart race, even as her mind screamed warnings. "Until we meet again," he murmured, his green eyes holding hers. The taxi arrived quickly, probably because of Marco's influence, and Sophia slipped into the back seat, her mind reeling. As the car pulled away from Villa Romano, she turned to look back through the rear window. Marco stood on the sidewalk, watching her leave, flanked by both of the men she had noticed during dinner. Even from a distance, there was something intimidating about the way they stood, something that spoke of violence barely held in check. During the 20-minute ride back to her apartment, Sophia's mind raced through everything that had happened. The expensive restaurant where Marco was clearly a VIP, the way the staff treated him with fearful respect, the armed men watching their table, the interruption about Russians and urgent business that couldn't wait, his evasiveness about his work, describing only a traditional Italian family business. By the time the taxi pulled up outside her building, a terrible suspicion had crystallized in Sophia's mind. She had defended enough organized crime figures to recognize the signs, and everything about Marco Benedetti screamed mafia. Her phone buzzed with another text from Emma as she climbed the stairs to her third-floor apartment. "Well, don't leave me hanging." Sophia stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. It was complicated. "I'll call you tomorrow." Once inside her apartment, Sophia poured herself a large glass of wine, something much cheaper than the Barolo Marco had ordered, and sat on her couch, trying to process the evening. Part of her wanted to dismiss her suspicions as paranoia brought on by too many criminal cases and too much crime television. But her instincts, honed by years of legal work, were screaming that she was right. Marco Benedetti was not just a successful businessman with a traditional Italian family company. He was something much more dangerous. But what terrified Sophia most was that despite everything, despite the warning signs, the dangerous men, the obvious lies, she couldn't stop thinking about the way he had looked at her, the way his accent made her name sound like a caress, the way his hand had felt on her back, strong and possessive and thrilling. She was attracted to a man who might be a criminal, a man who operated in a world of violence and corruption, a man who represented everything her carefully ordered, law-abiding life stood against. Sophia finished her wine and went to bed, but sleep was elusive. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marco's green eyes and that dangerous smile. She wondered what kind of business emergency involved Russians. She wondered how many laws he had broken. She wondered if she would ever see him again. Most disturbingly, she wondered if she wanted to. The next morning, Sophia threw herself into work with even more intensity than usual, trying to push thoughts of Marco from her mind. She had 3 cases to prepare for the upcoming week, including a high-profile defense of a city councilman accused of accepting bribes. It was exactly the kind of complex, challenging case that usually consumed all her attention. But today, she found herself distracted, her mind wandering back to the previous evening. She Googled Marco Benedetti, but found surprisingly little information. Just a few business registrations for import companies and a mention in a society page from 2 years ago at a charity fundraiser. For someone who claimed to be in a successful family business, his online presence was remarkably minimal Around noon, her assistant buzzed her intercom. "Ms. Martinez, there's a delivery for you." "What kind of delivery?" "Flowers. Very expensive-looking flowers." Sophia's heart skipped. She told her assistant to bring them in, and moments later, a stunning arrangement of white roses and Italian lilies filled her office with their perfume. The card was simple, written in elegant script. "Thank you for a perfect evening. Until next time, M." She stared at the flowers, torn between throwing them in the trash and burying her face in their petals. They were beautiful, obviously expensive, and undoubtedly chosen with care. But they were also a reminder of a man who might be everything she should avoid. Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. "Sophia Martinez. Cara mia." The voice sent shivers down her spine, deep, accented, unmistakably Marco's. "How did you get my office number?" "I have my ways," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Did you receive my small gift?" Sophia looked at the flowers. "They're beautiful. But Marco, I need to ask you something directly." "Of course. What is on your mind?" She took a deep breath. "What exactly is your business? And don't give me vague answers about import and export. I'm a defense attorney. I've heard every euphemism in the book." There was a long pause. When Marco spoke again, his voice was more serious. "You are direct. I appreciate that. Perhaps we should discuss this in person." "I'm not sure that's a good idea." "Sophia," Marco said, his voice soft but intense. "I understand you have concerns, but I hope you will not judge me based on assumptions. Give me a chance to explain. Have dinner with me tonight. Somewhere more private, where we can speak freely." Every rational part of Sophia's brain screamed at her to say no. But there was something in his voice, vulnerability, perhaps, or genuine caring, that made her hesitate. "I don't know, Marco. Please, one more evening. If after that you decide you never want to see me again, I will respect that completely. But give me a chance to show you who I really am." Sophia closed her eyes, knowing she was about to make a terrible decision. "Where?" "I will cook for you. My apartment has a private dining room where we can talk without interruption. I promise you will be completely safe." Going to a potential criminal's apartment alone was possibly the stupidest thing Sophia could imagine doing. But the lawyer in her was curious about the truth, and the woman in her was drawn to Marco despite every warning sign. "Text me the address," she heard herself say. "I'll be there at 8. After she hung up, Sophia sat back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. She was either about to have a romantic dinner with a misunderstood businessman, or she was walking straight into a trap set by a dangerous criminal. Either way, she was going to find out the truth about Marco Benedetti. That evening, Sophia found herself standing outside a luxury high-rise in the most expensive part of the city. The building was the kind of place where penthouses sold for millions, and the doormen wore suits nicer than most people's wedding attire. Marco's apartment was on the 32nd floor, the penthouse level. The doorman, who obviously knew she was expected, escorted her to a private elevator that required a keycard to access. As the elevator climbed, Sophia's nervousness grew. She was committed now, but she had taken precautions. Emma knew where she was going and had instructions to call the police if Sophia didn't check in by 10 p.m. Sophia also had her pepper spray in her purse and her phone set to speed dial 911. The elevator opened directly into Marco's apartment, and Sophia's breath caught. The space was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city, expensive artwork on the walls, furniture that clearly cost more than most people's cars. But it was also tasteful, not ostentatious. Someone with genuine style lived here, not just someone with money. Marco appeared from what looked like the kitchen area, wearing dark slacks and a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked more relaxed than he had at the restaurant, but no less devastatingly handsome. "Welcome to my home," he said, moving to greet her. "You look beautiful, as always." Sophia had chosen her outfit carefully. Professional, but not severe. Attractive, but not suggestive. A simple black dress with a blazer that she could remove if she wanted to appear more approachable, or keep on if she needed to maintain distance. "Thank you for inviting me," Sophia said, accepting the glass of wine he offered. It was the same Barolo from the previous night. "Come," Marco said, gesturing toward the dining area. "I hope you are hungry. I prepared something special." The dining room was intimate, with a table set for two near the windows overlooking the city lights. Candles provided soft lighting, and the scent of something delicious drifted from the kitchen. "You really cooked?" Sophia asked, surprised. Marco smiled, and for the first time, it seemed completely genuine. "My nonna taught me when I was young. She said a man who cannot cook cannot take care of a woman properly." They sat down, and Marco served the first course, perfectly prepared bruschetta with tomatoes, basil, and fresh mozzarella. "So," he said, pouring more wine, "you want to know about my business?" Sophia nodded, appreciating his directness. "Yes, I do." Marco was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "My family has been in America for 3 generations. My great-grandfather came from Sicily in 1923, looking for a better life. Like many Italian immigrants, he found that the legitimate opportunities were limited." Sophia's heart sank. This was sounding exactly like the background stories she had heard from dozens of organized crime defendants. "He did what he felt he had to do to survive and provide for his family," Marco continued. "Some of those things were not entirely legal. Over time, the family business grew and evolved. By the time my father took over, we were involved in many different enterprises." "What kind of enterprises?" "Restaurants, import businesses, construction companies, waste management, many legitimate operations." Marco paused. "But also some that operate in gray areas." Sophia set down her wineglass. "Gray areas? Marco, please just tell me directly. Are you involved in organized crime?" Marco met her gaze steadily. "The world is not as simple as legal and illegal, Sophia. There are businesses that exist in the spaces between laws, that provide services people want, but society pretends not to need. Protection for businesses in dangerous neighborhoods. Resolution of disputes when the courts are too slow or cannot be trusted. Loans for people who cannot get them from banks. Those are euphemisms, Marco. You're talking about extortion, vigilante justice, and loan sharking. I am talking about filling needs that exist, whether we acknowledge them or not." Marco's voice was calm but intense. "Do you think crime disappears if people like my family are not involved? No. It becomes chaos. Violence without control or honor. At least we have rules, codes of conduct." Sophia felt a chill. "Codes of conduct? You make it sound noble." "There is honor in what we do, even if others cannot see it. We protect our neighborhoods. We take care of our families. We keep our word." "Can you say the same for the politicians and businessmen who operate entirely within the law?" Sophia thought of some of her clients, wealthy executives who had defrauded pension funds, politicians who had sold their votes to the highest bidder. Marco wasn't entirely wrong, but that didn't make what he was describing right. "So you're telling me you're a member of the mafia?" Sophia said bluntly. Marco's jaw tightened. That word carries many assumptions, but yes, I am part of a family organization that has existed for nearly a century. I inherited responsibilities I did not choose, but that I cannot simply walk away from. The main course arrived. Marco had prepared ossobuco with risotto that smelled incredible, but Sophia's appetite had evaporated. She was sitting across from a confessed criminal, a man who admitted to being part of an organization responsible for who knows how much violence and corruption. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I think you deserve the truth. Because you ask directly, and I respect your intelligence too much to lie to you. And because—" Marco paused, seeming to struggle with his words. Because in my world, I am surrounded by people who want things from me. Money, protection, favors. They fear me or they use me, but they do not see me as simply a man. Last night, for the first time in years, I felt like someone was seeing Marco, not just what Marco represents. Despite everything, Sophia felt her heart soften slightly. There was genuine emotion in his voice, a vulnerability that seemed at odds with his criminal admissions. "But I can't just ignore what you do," Sophia said. "I'm a defense attorney, yes, but I believe in the law. I believe in justice." "And what is justice, cara mia? Is it justice when a man who steals millions from workers' retirement funds gets 2 years in minimum security prison, while a kid who sells drugs to feed his family gets 10 years? Is it justice when domestic violence victims cannot get protection from the police, but we can keep their abusers away permanently?" Sophia wanted to argue, but she had seen enough of the legal system to know that Marco's points weren't entirely without merit. Justice was often imperfect, sometimes corrupt, frequently inadequate. "That doesn't make vigilante justice right," she said. "No," Marco agreed, "but it makes it understandable." They ate in relative silence for several minutes, both lost in thought. The food was exceptional. Marco was clearly a talented cook, but the atmosphere was heavy with the weight of his revelations. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia finally said. "Of course. Have you personally ever hurt someone? Killed someone?" Marco set down his fork and looked directly at her. "In my world, sometimes violence is necessary to prevent greater violence. Have I made difficult choices? Yes. Have I done things I'm not proud of? Yes. But I have never harmed an innocent person, and I have never acted without just cause." It wasn't a denial, and they both knew it. Sophia felt nauseous, not from the wine, but from the realization that she was attracted to a man who had probably killed people. The rational part of her mind was screaming at her to leave, to run as far and as fast as she could. But another part of her, a part she didn't like to acknowledge, was intrigued by the danger, by the forbidden nature of her attraction. Marco was unlike any man she had ever met, and despite his criminal connections, she couldn't deny that he treated her with more respect and genuine interest than any of the lawyers, doctors, and businessmen she usually dated. "I should go," Sophia said, pushing back from the table. Marco nodded, though disappointment flashed across his face. "Of course. I understand." He walked her to the elevator, and as they waited for it to arrive, Sophia felt the weight of the moment. This was probably the last time she would see Marco Benedetti. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to walk away and never look back. "Sophia," Marco said as the elevator doors opened, "whatever you decide about us, I want you to know that meeting you has reminded me that there are good things in this world worth protecting. Whatever else I am grateful for that gift." The elevator doors started to close, and Sophia felt a sudden panic. "Wait," she said, stopping them with her hand. Marco looked at her with surprise and hope. "I need time to think," Sophia said. "This is a lot to process. Take all the time you need, cara mia. I will wait." As the elevator descended, Sophia leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. She was falling for a man who was everything she should avoid, everything her career and principles stood against. But she was also falling for a man who saw her as more than just another ambitious lawyer, who cooked for her and spoke to her like she mattered, who treated her with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his dangerous life. The next few days passed in a blur of work and internal conflict. Sophia threw herself into her cases with renewed intensity, trying to distract herself from thoughts of Marco. But everywhere she looked, she saw reminders of him. The flowers in her office, which she couldn't bring herself to throw away. News stories about organized crime investigations that made her wonder about his safety. Italian restaurants that reminded her of their dinner. Emma called repeatedly, demanding details about the mysterious Marco, but Sophia couldn't bring herself to explain the situation. How could she tell her best friend that she was attracted to a confessed criminal? On Wednesday evening, as Sophia was working late at the office, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Sophia Martinez. Miss Martinez, this is Detective Ryan Murphy with the NYPD. I need to speak with you about Marco Benedetti. Sophia's blood turned to ice. What about him? We understand you've been seen with him recently. Can you come to the station? We'd like to ask you a few questions. Sophia's mind raced. As a defense attorney, she knew she wasn't obligated to speak to the police without a lawyer present. But she also knew that refusing would only make her look suspicious. What is this regarding, Detective? There was an incident last night. A business establishment was burned down. We have reason to believe it was related to territorial disputes in Mr. Benedetti's organization. Sophia closed her eyes. Property destruction, possible arson, territorial disputes. This was exactly the kind of criminal activity she had suspected Marco was involved in. I'll be there in an hour, she said. The police station was exactly as depressing as Sophia remembered from her early days as a public defender. Fluorescent lights, uncomfortable plastic chairs, the smell of stale coffee and desperation. Detective Murphy was a tired-looking man in his 50s, with graying hair and suspicious eyes. Thank you for coming in, Miss Martinez. Can you tell me about your relationship with Marco Benedetti? Sophia chose her words carefully. We've had dinner twice. Casual dating. And what did you discuss during these dinners? Personal matters, getting to know each other. Did Mr. Benedetti mention any business conflicts? Disputes with other organizations? No. This was technically true. Marco had mentioned Russians during their first dinner, but he hadn't discussed any details. Detective Murphy slid a photograph across the table. It showed the burned remains of what had once been a nightclub, smoke still rising from the rubble. The Flamingo Club, owned by the Petrov organization, Russian immigrants involved in various criminal enterprises. Someone torched it last night. 3 people were hospitalized with smoke inhalation. Sophia stared at the photo, remembering Luca's interruption at the restaurant. The Russians. There has been a development. Was this the development? Had Marco been involved in this destruction? Miss Martinez, I need to be direct with you. Marco Benedetti is a person of interest in multiple ongoing investigations. Extortion, illegal gambling, money laundering, and now possibly arson. You seem like an intelligent, successful woman. What are you doing with a man like that? Sophia bristled at the condescending tone, even though the detective's concerns were valid. Mr. Benedetti hasn't been charged with anything, has he? Not yet. But it's only a matter of time. These guys always slip up eventually. The detective questioned her for another 20 minutes, but Sophia provided only the bare minimum of information. She hadn't witnessed any criminal activity, she insisted, and her interactions with Marco had been purely social. As she left the police station, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I heard you spoke with the police. We need to talk. M. Sophia's hands shook as she typed back. How did you know? I know many things. Can you meet me? It's important. Every instinct told Sophia to say no. The smart thing would be to cut all contact with Marco immediately, before she became more deeply involved in whatever criminal activities surrounded him. But she also knew she wouldn't be able to stop thinking about him unless she got answers to the questions burning in her mind. Where? She typed. The park near your apartment. 1 hour. Come alone. Sophia arrived at the small neighborhood park near her building to find Marco sitting on a bench, looking out at the city lights. He seemed different, more tense, more alert. When he saw her approaching, he stood but didn't move to embrace her as he had before. Thank you for coming, he said. The police showed me pictures of a burned building. They think you were involved. Marco's jaw tightened. And what do you think? I think you're not denying it. Because I cannot deny it, not entirely. Marco turned to face her fully. There was a situation with the Russian organization. They were expanding into territory that has belonged to my family for 30 years, threatening businesses under our protection. Diplomacy failed. So you burned down their nightclub? I did not personally light any fires, but yes, the decision to send that message was mine. Sophia felt sick. 3 people were hurt, Marco, hospitalized. And how many more would have been hurt if we had allowed the Russians to establish themselves? They do not operate with the same restraint that we do. They would have brought chaos and violence to neighborhoods that have been peaceful for decades. You can't know that. I can, and I do. This is not the first time we have dealt with territorial disputes. Sometimes a show of force prevents much greater bloodshed. Sophia stared at him, trying to reconcile the gentle, charming man who had cooked for her with someone who ordered buildings burned. I can see what you're thinking, Marco said quietly. You're wondering how you could have been attracted to someone capable of such things. Yes, Sophia admitted. I am. Because you are a good person, Sophia. You see the world in terms of right and wrong, legal and illegal. You believe that justice comes from courts and laws and proper procedures. In your world, that is usually true. But not in your world? In my world, justice sometimes has to be taken, not waited for. In my world, showing weakness invites predators who will hurt innocent people. In my world, the police cannot or will not protect the people who need protecting most. Marco stepped closer to her, and Sophia could smell his cologne, could see the pain in his green eyes. I am not asking you to approve of what I do, he said. I am only asking you to understand that the world is more complicated than you might want to believe. I can't be with someone who solves problems with violence, Marco. I can't. Then you're going to walk away? Just like that? Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. What choice do I have? You live in a world of crime and violence. I live in a world of law and order. Those worlds don't mix. Don't they? Marco's voice was soft, but intense. How many of your clients have been people like me, Sophia? How many criminals have you defended, helped go free? What's the difference between representing them in court and caring for one of them in person? The question hit Sophia like a physical blow, because it was one she had been asking herself for days. She had built her career defending people who had broken the law, some of them violent criminals, some of them people involved in organized crime. She told herself she was upholding the principle that everyone deserved a defense. But was that really so different from accepting Marco for who he was? It's different, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Or is it just easier to maintain your moral certainty when there's professional distance? Sophia turned away from him, staring out at the city lights. I don't know, Marco. I honestly don't know anymore. They stood in silence for several minutes. Finally, Marco spoke again. There's something else you should know. The police questioning you, that wasn't random. Someone told them about us. Someone who wanted to put pressure on you to stay away from me. Sophia turned back to him. Who? I'm not certain yet, but I have suspicions. There are people who would prefer that I remain isolated, focused only on business matters. Personal relationships can be seen as complications. Are you saying I'm in danger? Not physically, no. But your reputation, your career, yes, those could be at risk if you're seen as being involved with me. Sophia felt a flash of anger. So this whole thing getting close to me, was that just business too? A way to compromise a defense attorney who might be useful? Marco's eyes flashed with hurt and anger. Do you really think so little of me? Do you think what happened between us was calculated? I don't know what to think anymore. Marco stepped closer, close enough that Sophia could see the gold flecks in his green eyes. Then let me tell you what to think. What happened between us was real. More real than anything I have felt in years. You think I would risk exposing myself? Risk telling you the truth about my life? For some business advantage? Sophia wanted to believe him, but the rational part of her mind couldn't let go of her suspicions. How do I know you're telling the truth? Because I am going to do something I have never done before, Marco said. I am going to give you a choice with complete honesty about the consequences. What kind of choice? You can walk away right now, tonight, and I will make sure you are never bothered by any of this again. Your name will be kept out of any investigations, your reputation will remain intact, and you can go back to your safe, predictable life. Or, Marco's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Or you can choose to be with me, knowing exactly what that means. Knowing that my world is dangerous, that there will always be risks, that some people will judge you for your association with me, but also knowing that I will protect you with my life, that I will never lie to you again, and that you will have the love of a man who sees you as the most precious thing in his world. Sophia stared at him, her heart pounding. It was the choice she had been avoiding, the decision that would determine the entire course of her life. I need time, she said. How much time? I don't know. Days? Weeks? This isn't the kind of decision you make quickly. Marco nodded, though disappointment was clear on his face. I understand. But Sophia, while you're deciding, be careful. If someone was willing to send the police after you once, they may try other approaches. What do you mean? Watch your back. Don't go anywhere alone late at night. If anything seems unusual, if anyone approaches you claiming to represent me, call me immediately. Marco pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to her. This is a secure number. It reaches me directly, day or night. Sophia took the card, her fingers brushing against his. Even now, even with everything she knew about him, his touch sent electricity through her. One more thing, Marco said. Whatever you decide about us, I want you to know that knowing you has changed me. You've reminded me that there are things in this world worth being better for. Before Sophia could respond, Marco turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows between the streetlights. Sophia stood alone in the park, clutching the card, wondering if she had just said goodbye to the most dangerous and most compelling man she had ever met. The next few days passed in a haze of second-guessing and internal debate. Sophia found herself unable to focus on work, unable to eat, unable to sleep. She kept thinking about Marco's words, about the choice he had given her. On Friday afternoon, she was in her office trying to concentrate on a brief when her assistant buzzed her. Ms. Martinez, there's a woman here to see you. She says it's about Marco Benedetti. Sophia's blood ran cold. Send her in. The woman who entered her office was strikingly beautiful, tall, elegant, with auburn hair and calculating dark eyes. She wore an expensive suit and moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what she wanted. Ms. Martinez, thank you for seeing me. I'm Isabella Torino. The name meant nothing to Sophia, but something about the woman's demeanor set off alarm bells. What can I do for you, Ms. Torino? Isabella sat down uninvited and crossed her legs. I understand you've been spending time with Marco Benedetti. I'm not sure that's any of your business. Isabella smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Actually, it is my business. You see, Marco and I have been involved for several years. I'm what you might call his long-term companion. Sophia felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. I see. I don't think you do. Marco is a complicated man, Ms. Martinez. He's powerful, wealthy, attractive, the kind of man who draws attention from many women. But he always comes back to me, because I understand his world in a way that outsiders cannot. Why are you telling me this? Because I can see that you're a smart woman, and smart women shouldn't waste their time on futile pursuits. Marco might enjoy a brief diversion with someone like you, someone clean, respectable, different from his usual world. But it will never be serious. It can't be. Isabella leaned forward, her voice becoming more intense. His family, his associates, his entire life revolves around a world you could never be part of. You're a defense attorney, yes, but you're still an outsider. Still someone who fundamentally doesn't understand what drives men like Marco. Sophia found her voice. And you do understand? I grew up in this world. My father was associated with Marco's family for decades. I know what it means to love a man who makes difficult choices, who sometimes has to do terrible things for the greater good. I know how to be supportive without asking questions that can't be answered. The implication was clear. Sophia, with her need for honesty and moral clarity, could never accept Marco's life the way Isabella could. More importantly, Isabella continued, I know how to survive in this world. The threats, the rivalries, the constant danger. It's not a game, Ms. Martinez. People who get too close to Marco without understanding the risks, sometimes they get hurt. Sophia's spine stiffened. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. There are people who see your involvement with Marco as a liability. People who think you make him weak, distracted. If something were to happen to you, Marco would blame himself, but that wouldn't change the outcome. Isabella stood and smoothed down her skirt. I'm sure you think you have feelings for Marco, and I'm sure he's been very charming with you. But ask yourself this. Has he told you he loves you? Has he made any promises about a future together? Or has he simply made you feel special while keeping his options open? The questions hit home because Sophia realized Marco hadn't made any declarations of love or commitment. He had been charming, attentive, honest about his life, but he hadn't actually promised her anything beyond the moment they were in. Think about it, Ms. Martinez, and think about whether whatever you feel for Marco is worth risking your career, your safety, and ultimately your life. After Isabella left, Sophia sat in her office for a long time, staring at the flowers Marco had sent. Flowers that now seemed like a mockery of her romantic delusions. Had she completely misread the situation? Was she just another conquest for a man who collected beautiful women the way he collected expensive art? But even as doubt crept in, Sophia couldn't forget the vulnerability in Marco's voice when he had talked about how she made him feel, the genuine emotion when he said knowing her had changed him. Either he was the most skilled manipulator she had ever encountered, or Isabella was lying. That evening, Sophia made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week ago. She called the number on Marco's card. Cara mia. His voice was warm and surprised. I hoped you would call, but I wasn't certain. Marco, I need to ask you something directly, and I need the truth. Always. Who is Isabella Torino? There was a long pause. When Marco spoke again, his voice was guarded. She came to see you. Yes. She claims to be your long-term companion. She says you and she have been involved for years, and that I'm just a brief diversion. Isabella is... Marco sighed deeply. She is part of my world, yes. Her family and mine have been connected for decades. There was a time when people assumed when it seemed like we might have a future together. Sophia's heart sank. And I realized that I could never love someone who saw me only as what I represented, not who I was. Isabella understands my world, yes, but she also encourages the worst parts of it. She likes the power, the fear, the respect that comes from being associated with someone like me. She has never once asked me to be better than I am. But you were involved with her? Yes, on and off for several years. It was convenient, expected by our families, but never love, Sophia. Never what I feel when I am with you. Sophia felt tears starting to fall. She says you haven't told me you love me. She says you haven't made any promises. Because I was afraid. Marco's voice was raw with emotion. Because I was trying to give you time to decide what you wanted without putting pressure on you. Because I have never said those words to another woman, and I was terrified of how you would respond. Marco, ti amo, Sophia. I love you. I love your strength, your intelligence, your principles, even when they conflict with mine. I love the way you challenge me to be better. I love that you see Marco the man, not Marco the boss. And if you will have me, if you will accept the risks and complications that come with loving someone like me, then I promise you this. You will never doubt your importance to me again. Sophia closed her eyes, feeling the last of her walls crumble. I love you too, she whispered. Then come to me. Now, tonight. We have wasted enough time on fear and doubt. Sophia grabbed her keys and headed for the door, her heart racing. She was making a choice that went against everything she thought she wanted for her life, but it was also the only choice that felt true to her heart. 20 minutes later, she was back in Marco's apartment, in his arms, letting herself feel everything she had been fighting for weeks. His kisses were desperate, hungry, as if he had been starving without her. And Sophia realized she had been starving too, for passion, for connection, for someone who saw her as more than just her career ambitions. Are you sure? Marco asked, pulling back to look into her eyes. Once we do this, once you choose this life, there may be no going back. I'm sure, Sophia said, and she meant it, but I have conditions. Marco smiled. Name them. No more lies, no more half-truths or evasions. If I'm going to be part of your world, I need to know what's happening. Agreed. And I keep my career. I'm not giving up everything I've worked for. I wouldn't ask you to. Your strength is part of what I love about you. And if we do this, if we build something together, I want you to consider alternatives, legal businesses, legitimate ways to use your influence and resources. Marco's expression grew serious. That would be complicated. There are responsibilities, commitments that go back generations. I'm not asking you to abandon your family. I'm asking you to think about building something new alongside the old. Something we could both be proud of. Marco studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. For you, cara mia, I will consider anything. They spent that night talking, planning, dreaming about what their life together might look like. It wouldn't be easy. There would be dangers, moral complexities, social judgments. But as Sophia lay in Marco's arms, listening to his heartbeat, she knew she was exactly where she belonged. Over the following months, their relationship deepened and evolved. Sophia learned to navigate Marco's world while maintaining her own identity and career. She met his family, a complex network of relatives and associates who initially viewed her with suspicion, but gradually came to respect her intelligence and strength. She learned that Marco was more than just a criminal. He was a man trying to honor traditions while adapting to a changing world, someone who genuinely cared about protecting his community, even if his methods were questionable. Marco, meanwhile, began to explore legitimate business opportunities. He invested in restaurants, real estate development, and import companies that operated entirely within the law. It was slow progress, and he couldn't abandon his family's traditional activities overnight. But Sophia could see him changing, growing, becoming someone who might eventually be able to walk entirely in the light. Their love story wasn't perfect or traditional, but it was real. They challenged each other, supported each other, and found in their partnership something neither had expected to find. A balance between Sophia's idealistic pursuit of justice and Marco's pragmatic understanding of power. Isabella made a few more attempts to undermine their relationship, but eventually gave up and found someone else to manipulate. The police investigation into the nightclub fire eventually stalled due to lack of evidence. though Sophia suspected Marco had used his influence to ensure that outcome. There were difficult moments, times when Marco's business put strain on their relationship, times when Sophia questioned whether she was compromising too much of herself. But there were also beautiful moments, quiet dinners where they talked about books and music and dreams, trips to Italy where Sophia met Marco's extended family and began to understand the deep cultural roots of his worldview, nights when they lay together and planned a future that seemed impossible but felt inevitable. 6 months after that first blind date, Marco proposed to Sophia in the same restaurant where they had met. Villa Romano was closed to other customers that evening. Marco had rented the entire place for their private dinner. As Sophia looked around the room where her life had changed so dramatically, she thought about how unexpected love could be. She had gone on that blind date expecting nothing more than a pleasant evening with a stranger. Instead, she had found a man who challenged every assumption she had about herself and her life. A man who was dangerous and gentle, criminal and honorable, ruthless and tender. Most importantly, she had found someone who loved her not in spite of her strength and principles, but because of them. Someone who wanted to be better, because she believed he could be. "Yes," Sophia said, as Marco slipped the ring onto her finger. "Yes, to all of it. To the complications and the risks and the beautiful impossibility of us." And that's the story of how Sophia Martinez, successful defense attorney and believer in law and order, fell in love with Marco Benedetti, Italian-American businessman with ties to organized crime. Their story proves that love doesn't always follow the rules we set for ourselves, and sometimes the most unlikely connections can lead to the most profound transformations. Love, it turns out, has its own kind of justice. If this story captivated you, and you want to hear more incredible true stories about love, danger, and the unexpected turns life can take, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We share new stories every week about real people who found love in the most surprising places, overcame incredible odds, or discovered that life is far more complex and beautiful than they ever imagined. What did you think of Sophia and Marco's story? Have you ever found yourself attracted to someone who represented everything you thought you didn't want? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from our viewers about how these stories resonate with your own experiences. And remember, love doesn't always follow the path we expect it to. Sometimes the most meaningful connections come from the most unlikely places, with people who challenge us to grow beyond who we thought we were. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.